What did Bob Marley, Billy Joe Armstrong, John Mayer, Chris Cornell, Lindsey Buckingham, Dave Grohl, Chuck Berry, Nile Rodgers, Joni Mitchell, Mark Knopfler, Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, and Malcolm Young all have in common? Well, despite being more follically blessed than I, they are all pretty solid rhythm guitar players. You see, rhythm guitar is the unsung hero of guitar playability, often overlooked by the solos and riffs that tend to be the A-listers of any guitar performance. But having a solid rhythm guitar foundation is essential if you want to progress. Whether you plan on writing and recording your own stuff, joining a covers band or function band, or trying to find work as a session guitarist, being able to play in the pocket, which is more than just being able to play in time. It's about playing in the groove, being an integral part of the rhythm section. Think about this. You're at a party and you hear... Or... It's not the solo that gets people up and dancing, it's the rhythm guitar. And the bass and the drums, but it's the rhythm section that gets people moving. Being able to play in the pocket is what's going to set you out as someone who knows what they're doing. And poor rhythm technique is one of the easiest things to spot in a noob. Now, luckily for you, it's not actually that difficult with a bit of practice and persistence. And we can break it down into 3 simple techniques that, when used wisely, will elevate your playing and make you sound more like you know what you're doing. So number 1 is strumming technique. This is all to do with what your strumming arm is doing. In my case, it's my right arm. For a lot of people right-handed, this could be your left. What I often see with new guitarists are people strumming in a very rigid way, like this. Okay, there's no movement in the wrist, and it's almost like they have a hinge in their elbow that just keeps their arm going up and down. Now, this causes a very heavy-handed rhythm sound, almost like someone's playing the guitar with clubs. It offers no control over strumming dynamics, as pretty much everything is strummed at the same velocity. There's also very limited control to pick out individual strings. It's just... like I said, it's like playing with clubs. So what you need to do instead is to loosen your wrist, right? Imagine you're shaking off water or swatting a fly. So there should be very little movement, if any, coming from the elbow. It's all instead in the wrist, keeping the wrist light and a fairly light grip on the pick too. So like this. So to build good strumming hand technique, try initially playing without changing any chords. Just focus purely on what your right hand, or left hand if you're left-handed, is doing. You could also try playing along to a metronome or a drum loop, but just repeating that really basic strumming pattern until it feels like you can do it without concentrating. All right, you can look away, you can have a conversation whilst playing. And then try different strumming patterns. Again, just stay on the same chord if it helps you. Try doing your basic 4/4. Try isolating different strings, like the top or the low E string. So number 2 is fretting hand tricks. So this is about adding or removing fingers onto chords and seeing how they sound. So to give you an example, one of the first chord tricks or fretting hand tricks that I learned, and this is a chord, by the way, anyone who knows music theory will be able to tell you that this is a D sus4. But I didn't know that when I was learning. I just figured out that if you play a D, put the little finger right next to the this F sharp note, it makes a nice sound. Then I figured out if you take it back off again and take the middle finger off the F sharp note, it also makes a nice sound. Put it together, so as I said, there are names for these chords. That is a D sus4, That is a D2. Now the reasons why we have those numbers on the chords is probably a subject for another video. The point of today is just to play around with chords, adding fingers on or taking fingers off, and seeing what it sounds like. So just start off with trial and error. Try some chords and see what happens, see what it sounds like if you move your finger up a note, down a note, pull your finger off, put it back on again, add another one, see what happens. If it sounds bad, you'll know not to use it. Let's have a play with the G chord. So a technique I was using a lot there is called hammer-ons and pull-offs. A hammer-on being, and a pull-off being the opposite. The key here is to add your finger, do the hammer-on or the pull-off just after the note. So like this. Another little trick is that I'm using the basic scales within a chord to know what notes are permissible and what aren't. So in the G major scale, now I know the scale and I know where the notes are, but honestly, you don't need to memorize every single scale at this stage. If you just have a little practice around, YouTube, Google, the internet tabs will show you the different scales around the different chords. After you've done them a couple of times, muscle memory kicks in and you don't really need to know what notes you're playing at any given time. Your fingers just kind of do the work. So a G chord, again, is a really easy one in that sense, in that your first index finger can just move around those three strings and they all sound good because they're all in the G major scale. In time, you'll get to know the patterns, but for now, just working on what your fretting hand is doing. In my case, my left hand. If you're left-handed, it'll probably be your right hand, and what you can do around those chords to make them sound pretty. And the last little technique is going to be palm muting. So palm muting is about what's going on with the palm of your strumming hand on the bridge of the guitar. And it's not just for rock guitar build-ups, it's used all the time in good rhythm playing. So palm muting can add a sense of rhythm or beat when there's no drums playing. But even when drums are playing, it's these little offbeat mutes that help the guitar sit in the pocket. It's like carving out little pockets in the rhythm section for drum fills and snare hits. So to do it, to start off with, I would take a basic power chord, bar chord. So E's a good one. Place your palm, in particular the fleshy section of your strumming hand, just on the bridge of your guitar. And now depending on how far on the strings it is or off the strings is going to affect the velocity of your strumming and muting. So if not actually touching the strings and only on the bridge, so if you can see that, it doesn't mute the strings. But if we slide onto the strings, it completely mutes the strings. Now, if you're too far along, if you're right on top of the strings, actually you won't hear the chord at all. Okay, so you're just hearing that muted noise. The key is to get it in just the right place where you can still hear the chord, you can still hear those notes being played, but they're muted. So try very subtly and very slightly moving your palm along that area of the bridge until you get the sound you want. key then is to very gently roll your palm on and off the strings to adjust the velocity of your muting or unmuting. So once you feel comfortable with muting on a basic chord, like an E power chord, the key then is to start adding these muting techniques into your normal chord rhythm. So let's give it a go. So I'm just really carefully adding it in there just to give that element of percussion. So a little trick that I sometimes use just to help me lever between muting and not muting is to use my pinky finger, kind of like a pivot. So I'll place it just, you can see, just kind of beneath the sound hole, below the strings to the side. And that acts as a bit of an anchor / pivot. So there we go, 3 simple rhythm guitar techniques that when used wisely will elevate your rhythm guitar playing and make you sound like you know what you're doing. Let me know in the comments below if you can think of any other rhythm guitar techniques that I may have missed. And please do that. This isn't about you pointing out to me what I might have forgotten. This is about community. People dig into the comments to try and find info. I dig into the comments of other YouTube videos to try and find information out. So if you think I've missed something, pop it in the comments, it'll help someone. And if you got something out of this video, please give it a like and a cheeky subscribe, or a subscribe and a cheeky like. I'll leave that up to you. And perhaps I'll see you in the next video.